The transfer window is closed and the first 3 games have been played. So it's time to go through again how I think the Premier League season will go. Like, we know how teams are going to set up this year, we know how teams are playing, we know the form of teams, and we know what deals have been done to ensure teams' places this year in the Premier League and what's been moving around and stuff like that. Means that Liverpool have won all 3 of their games. Obviously, looking at the table right now, there's some surprises on there, but let's go through it and then we'll see where we end up. In the season, obviously Arsenal I think are still going to beat Forest in that game. I think Bournemouth have really made a good impression of themselves so far, beating Brighton there, and I think Crystal Palace still beat Sunderland, who I think have had a good transfer window, but that's how it happens. Jack Grealish returned to, well, playing against Villa, and I think he's going to still have a good game. Fulham, I think, are still going to beat Leeds there in that game. I think Newcastle are going to draw with Wolves. I think there's going to be teething issues still with the team. I like the transfers that they've made, but I think the teething issues are still there. West Ham with a bit of confidence, but Spurs are still going to do better. Chelsea keep clean sheets there, and Liverpool to keep up their perfect run, and he's to get a couple goals on his debut there. I think United do lose in that first game in the derby. I think it's not going to be good for him there, and I think Liverpool continue on their winning ways against Everton there. Bournemouth, I think, beat Newcastle on the long trip down there. I think Brighton managed to get the better of Spurs, and I think Burnley and Forest will draw. I think Forest will start to feel the effects of the European football at this point. Same with Palace drawing with West Ham there. Actually not getting beat by West Ham, we're going to have there. Wolves beating Leeds, and then United I think are going to draw with Chelsea. Chelsea, once again, the effects of the European football on them, and United not having that, I think slightly feeling better about themselves. Fulham beating Brentford, and I think Sunderland and Villa drawing 0-0 in that game, and I think Arsenal still get better seats. So after 5 games we see the top 4 being Liverpool, Arsenal, Bournemouth and Chelsea, making up the top 4. Villa still bottom of the table without a win, and Newcastle also without a win. 2 teams you expect to have done really well outside the season, but yet to do so. United, I think, continue a bit of form, and then Villa start to bring their form out of a win there against Fulham. Crystal Palace holding Liverpool to a draw, ending Liverpool's perfect start to the season, whilst Chelsea just beat Brighton. I think Leeds managed to get a draw out of Bournemouth still, and I think City enjoy a nice big win over Burnley, whilst Forest beat Sunderland still. No issues there for them. Spurs find a little trouble there, but nothing too crazy, and Newcastle getting a draw against Arsenal, whilst Everton find themselves getting a 3-1 win over West Ham there. Big win. Everton keeping up good form. Bournemouth beating Fulham, I think, is fair. I think Leeds is making Ellen Road a bit of a tough place to go, and I think they can keep it up there. I think Arsenal beating West Ham is just bound to happen, and then Everton and Palace in a 2-2 draw, while United beat Sunderland 2-0, keeping another might be the first clean sheet of the year. That I think Chelsea beat Liverpool, ending Liverpool's unbeaten run, and then Villa continue on a bit better form. Maybe Martinez gets back into the team by this point, they start getting the clean sheets again, while Newcastle and Forest draw. Wolves beating Brighton, and Brentford getting beat by City. I think all fair results. We'll get the game with 10 outs and we'll calculate again how the teams are looking, as Forest get a win over Chelsea, Sunderland get that win over Wolves, Brighton beating Newcastle on a really bad start to the season here, Crystal Palace beating Bournemouth, Burnley drawing with Leeds. We're going to have City beating Everton, we're going to have Fulham getting beat by Arsenal, Spurs beating Villa, we're going to have Liverpool beating United. I'm not going to be that delusional, guys. I like to be delusional, but not that much. And then West Ham getting a win against Brentford. It's a big win for them there. But then Leeds getting that win they need against West Ham the week after, doing well for themselves. Liverpool still winning games, still not finding it tough. Eze on his return to Crystal Palace there, and then Chelsea beating Sunderland. Easy stuff. Newcastle just beat Fulham. United beating Brighton, ending their woes against Brighton. And then Bournemouth beating Forest 1-0, nice and easy. And then Villa and City still winning that game. Wolves still beating Burnley, and Everton and Spurs caught in a 0-0 there. Whilst the week after, Sunderland get a 1-0 win over Everton, and then Brighton play against Leeds and get a 3-0 win. Crystal Palace playing against Brentford in a 5-1 victory, throwing a few shocks in there. Arsenal beating Burnley. We're going to have Fulham beating Wolves, Liverpool beating Villa, Man City beating Bournemouth, Forest beating United. We're going to have a big exciting game there, 5-2 to Chelsea at White Hart Lane, or the new Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, whatever you want to call it. And West Ham and Newcastle drawing, and in game week 10 we see Arsenal top of the table. Aston Villa still in the relegation zone alongside Burnley and Brentford. Brentford only one win on their hands, and the win that they got, I'm maybe a bit biased towards Brentford right now. Sunderland still pretty high up. United sat in 10th on 14 points, is better than where, how we feel about right now. Sitting in the top 4 with Chelsea, Liverpool and Arsenal. The top 4 people kind of see. Everyone's got a loss on the board after 10 games. And let's get into game week 19 as Arsenal still win their game. Villa and Bournemouth drawing 2-2. We're going to see Crystal Palace beating Brighton in the South Side derby there. Brentford getting beaten. Vissa returning there. Chelsea beating Wolves. We're going to see Everton beating Fulham. We're going to see City beating Liverpool there in a big win for City, that is. Forest beating Leeds. We're going to see United and Spurs draw. We're going to see West Ham beating Burnley. Bournemouth then the week after beating West Ham. We're going to see Brighton beating Brentford. Arsenal just beating Spurs. Chelsea winning their game against Burnley. And Fulham winning their game against Sunderland. Whilst Liverpool just beat Forest. Leeds drawing with Villa. We're going to see United beating Everton. A 1-1 draw between Newcastle and City, while Wolves beat Palace. Sunderland then in a 2-0 loss to Bournemouth. We're going to see Villa beating Wolves. Start to get a few results on the board. Crystal Palace beating United. Just maybe I'm hating on myself too much here. Brentford beating Burnley. We're going to see Chelsea beating Arsenal. Everton 0-0 with Newcastle. City absolutely walking over Leeds there. Forest walking over Brighton as well a little bit. Spurs and Fulham caught in a tight game there, and then another huge win for Liverpool on this game week as well. Some huge results in that week. Bournemouth beating Everton. We're going to see Brighton just beating Villa. Arsenal beating Brentford. Burnley drawing with Palace. We're going to see Fulham just get beat by City, while Liverpool put a few past Sunderland. Leeds make a good fight for Chelsea but still get beat. United beating West Ham. We're going to see Newcastle beating Spurs, and then Wolves drawing with Forest. I think Bournemouth beat Chelsea in that game. I still think they do, and I think Aston Villa get a draw out of Arsenal. I think Brighton are going to beat West Ham in this game. Everton getting a 1-0 win over Forest, huge for them. Fulham beating Palace. Leeds getting beat by Liverpool. City beating Sunderland, but only just kind of thing. Newcastle, I think, huge win over Burnley there, like they did a couple of years ago. Tottenham beating, and then United beating Wolves away. Calculating game at 15 here. Liverpool top of the table on 37 points. Arsenal, Chelsea and City still in that top 4. Bournemouth making a right push for it, making themselves proud on 32 points. A big gap between them and Spurs and United, both on 24 points. Palace, Forest all doing well. Everton doing well for themselves. Villa and Newcastle starting to push away up the table, as Leeds and Brentford and Burnley all in the relegation zone. Brentford with just losses all over the place. And Sunderland getting a cheeky win over Newcastle there, and then Palace doing the same over City. Arsenal beating Wolves. Brentford then beating Leeds. We're going to see Burnley getting a result over Fulham. We're going to see Chelsea beating Everton. Liverpool win that game. United drawing with Bournemouth. We're going to see Forest beating Spurs, and then West Ham beating Villa. Is not good for Villa at all. Bournemouth beating Burnley the week after. Villa beating United. Maybe I'm too harsh on us sometimes. Brighton beating Sunderland. Everton getting a 0-0 draw with Arsenal. Fulham drawing with Forest. We're going to see Leeds drawing with Crystal Palace. City beating West Ham. Chelsea and Newcastle drawing. Spurs and Liverpool drawing. We're going to see Wolves beating Brentford as well. Sunderland beating Leeds, big result that. Crystal Palace beating Spurs. Arsenal beating, big win for Bournemouth there against Brentford. Burnley getting a 2-1 win over Everton. Chelsea beating Villa. Liverpool win their game. United drawing with Newcastle. Forest drawing with City, and then West Ham beating Fulham. West Ham doing better than I had them initially. Crystal Palace beating Fulham. We're going to see Arsenal beating Villa there. Brentford still getting beat by the former manager. We'll see Burnley and Newcastle and 3-0 to Newcastle. Chelsea beating Bournemouth. We're going to see Liverpool beating Leeds. We're going to see United beating Wolves. Forest beating Everton. Oh my god, Forest beating Everton. There we go. And then West Ham drawing with Brighton. Game week 19 half for the season. Liverpool still top of the table. Arsenal, Chelsea and City all top 4 of them. Crystal Palace and Bournemouth and Forest all doing pretty well for themselves. United down there on 29 points. Spurs on 28 points. Brighton make up the top half on 26 points. Newcastle with a positive goal difference of 10, but still in the bottom half of the table on 25 points. Everton 22 points. We see relegation zones made of Leeds, Burnley and Brentford right at the bottom of the table. Brentford right now, absolutely no draws. The only team to not have a draw halfway through the season. Insane. Wolves and Villa both on 17 points, just outside the relegation zone. We'll see how that moves in the rest of the season. As Bournemouth beating Arsenal, huge result of that for them. Aston Villa beating Forest. We're going to see Brighton beating Burnley. Everton beating Brentford. Another loss for Brentford there is not good for them. United beating Leeds. You can see City beating Chelsea, big result for them there. Newcastle beating Crystal Palace. Spurs beating Sunderland. And then Wolves beating West Ham. We get to game week 28 if I'm going to calculate it next. Bournemouth continue there. Really nice start to the second half of the season here. Arsenal beating Liverpool. Huge result for them there. Brentford beating Sunderland. Burnley getting beat by United. Everton beating Wolves. Fulham beating Chelsea there. And it's a big game. I think Michael Silva really want that to happen. City beating Brighton and Newcastle beating Leeds, but not by as much as they want to. West Ham and Forest drawing, while Sunderland beat Palace. Villa start to move up the table now with a few wins here and there. Chelsea beating Brentford. Liverpool and Burnley playing each other. Liverpool can beat Burnley there, and then Leeds beating Fulham. United beating City in the derby, whilst Forest and Arsenal draw, and then Spurs beating West Ham. Wolves beating Newcastle. Bournemouth getting a result over Liverpool. Huge implications that has. Crystal Palace and Chelsea drawing. Arsenal beating United still. Brentford drawing with Forest. I think that's our first draw of the season. Spurs still beating Burnley. Everton to beat Leeds there. Fulham beating Brighton. City beating Wolves. We're going to see Newcastle just beating Villa, and then West Ham drawing with Sunderland. And then Sunderland win the next game. Sunderland doing pretty safe for themselves. Aston Villa beating Brentford. Brighton beating Everton. Chelsea beating West Ham. I'm just going to see like an 8-0 win here for Liverpool. Isak's going to have a day and a half for himself. Leeds getting beat by Arsenal. United beating Fulham. We're going to see Forest just beating Crystal Palace, and Spurs then beating City. And Wolves and Bournemouth drawing, I think, is fair for that. Bournemouth then beating Villa. Bournemouth doing really well for themselves. Brighton beating Crystal Palace. Arsenal beating Sunderland. We're going to see West Ham and Burnley draw. Fulham drawing with Everton. We're going to see Liverpool and City drawing. Leeds drawing with Forest. A lot of draws happening this week. United ending there. Tottenham woes with a win there. And then Wolves getting beat by Chelsea. The only way win of the week. Wow. Liverpool still win their games there. Villa getting a win over Brighton, a much needed win for themselves just to turn their fortunes around a little bit. Arsenal win their game. Chelsea beating Leeds. Everton beating Bournemouth. City beating Fulham. You expect that one to happen. Forest beating Wolves. Tottenham beating Newcastle, and then United beating West Ham away there. We've got 2 more games we'll calculate, and then Sunderland getting that win against Fulham's huge. Villa getting their win there. Palace getting their win. Brentford getting another win for themselves to try and push their way out of the relegation zone. Everton and United. United winning that game still. City beating Newcastle. Forest drawing with Liverpool. Spurs beating Arsenal though, so they don't manage to make their ground that they need to. Bournemouth still win their game. Brighton getting beat by Forest. Forest have got the lead on them. Arsenal just beating Chelsea the week after. Burnley and Brentford drawing. Fulham beating Spurs. Liverpool beating West Ham, as you'd expect them to do. City winning that game there. United beating Crystal Palace. Newcastle beating Everton, and then Wolves beating Villa. 10 games left of the season, and Liverpool and Arsenal are neck and neck. Chelsea just 3 points behind their win behind them. City on 60 points. Bournemouth still in 5th place on 55 points. United and Spurs not far behind either. The top 10, Newcastle finally in the top 10 and can make the push into European places. Villa, I don't think they're going to have the chance now on 32 points. Sunderland doing well for themselves on 29 points. Brentford still in the relegation zone alongside Leeds and Burnley. They've got 10 games to try and push their way out. West Ham and Wolves and Fulham and even Sunderland are all on the target zone still. Sunderland just 12 points away from where Brentford are. We'll see what can happen in the next 5 games as Bournemouth try and bury it a little. Villa beating Chelsea there, Brighton beating Arsenal, a lot of losses coming in for that top side of the table. Fulham beating West Ham, we're going to see Leeds beating Sunderland is a big one for Leeds, that City winning there. You can see Newcastle beating United and then Spurs beating Crystal Palace, whilst Wolves get beat by Liverpool. Liverpool make that way to the top of the table there. Sunderland and Brighton draw, and see Crystal Palace beating Leeds the week after. Arsenal beating Everton. We see Brentford get a big win against Wolves there, huge win against Wolves, as Burnley and Bournemouth draw. Chelsea beating Newcastle. Liverpool and Spurs drawing. United just beating Villa, and then Forest beating Fulham, while City beat West Ham. Bournemouth then beating United, just showing where Bournemouth are at. Villa winning their games. Brighton and Liverpool drawing. Everton and Chelsea drawing. Fulham beating Burnley. Leeds beating Brentford is big for Leeds to try and make their way out of the relegation zone as well. City beating Palace. We're going to see Newcastle get a bit of revenge for their loss early in the season, whilst Spurs and Forest getting that game, and then Arsenal winning their game there. Spurs fall short with a draw to Sunderland there. Crystal Palace beating Newcastle, whilst Arsenal just beat Bournemouth. Everton with a big win to try and get their way big loss, for Brentford to try and get their way out of relegation zone. Burnley beating Brighton, but only just. Chelsea beating City, as Liverpool beat Fulham. United beat Leeds. Forest beating Villa, and then West Ham beating Wolves. Get to one more game and we'll calculate again, as Villa beating Sunderland, Crystal Palace beating West Ham. We're going to see Brentford beating Fulham, they're making the way out of it. Chelsea beating United. You're going to see Liverpool and Everton draw 0-0. You're going to see Leeds beating Wolves. They're making a push for it. They're making the right push for it. Newcastle beating Bournemouth. We're going to see Forest beating Burnley, and then Tottenham beating Brighton. The top 4 is still Liverpool at the top, level on points with Arsenal, but City are just 1 point behind them. Chelsea just 2 points behind them. There's a big gap there between Bournemouth, but Bournemouth are close to United and Spurs now. Forest, Crystal Palace and Newcastle in the hunt for the final European space there in 8th spot. Only one of them can make it. Villa's probably too late for them, and Brighton probably too late for them as well. Everton have made a good account for themselves in the season so far, but the relegation fight is still between Leeds, Brentford, West Ham, Wolves and Sunderland are probably still in there as well. We'll wait and see what happens in the next 3 games, and we'll calculate it again as Bournemouth continue to win their path. Sunderland beating Forest is huge. Brighton beating Chelsea there as well, just to trying to show where they're at. City winning their games, what they need to do, get the goal difference in there. Fulham beating Villa. Liverpool and Palace drawing is not good for them at all. United beating Brentford, and then West Ham beating Everton, whilst Wolves and Spurs draw. Bournemouth beating Crystal Palace. You're going to see Villa, try and make a last minute survival bit for themselves here. Arsenal just continue on the winning way that they need to go on. Brentford beating West Ham, huge. Chelsea beating Forest there. We're going to see City continue winning their games. Leeds beating Burnley, putting Burnley in their place. United beating Liverpool. We're not allowing them to do nothing towards the end of the season, thank you very much. And then Wolves and Sunderland drawing 0-0. Huge game. Sunderland then getting beat by United. Wolves and Brighton drawing. Palace beating Everton. You're going to see Burnley getting beat by Villa. Fulham beating Bournemouth. Liverpool beating Chelsea, putting Chelsea out of really any fight. Forest beating Newcastle. Spurs beating Leeds, and then West Ham getting beaten by Arsenal. 2 games left. Arsenal top of the league now. City are just behind them. City are so close to anything here. United have overtaken Bournemouth now with 10 losses on the board. You'll see Brentford are still in the relegation zone, but West Ham and Wolves can still be caught. Sunderland can still be caught, but it's very unlikely they are going to be caught. Leeds could still make their way out as well in the last 2 games. Everton, Fulham safe, Brighton safe, Villa safe. They're not going to make up to Newcastle. Newcastle could still catch up to Palace and Forest for a final European place. We'll wait and see what happens, as Bournemouth draw with City is huge implications for what's going to happen in the rest of the season, as Liverpool beating Villa there. Arsenal with a huge win that is going to win them the title, as well as Brentford. I think it's won them the title. Should win them the title, I believe. Brentford beating Crystal Palace, making their way outside the relegation. Chelsea and Spurs drawing, as Everton beat Sunderland. Leeds beating Brighton, could make their way out. United beating Forest. Newcastle beating West Ham, could drop them down. And then Wolves beating Fulham. Final game now. Final game. And it is Arsenal have not won the league yet. They need to win the final game or draw it. United are going to finish 5th by the looks of it, unless we lose on the last day. Bournemouth can still overtake us. Spurs are going to finish 7th. Forest and Palace on the last day. Oh, that'd be juicy, that is, for European football. West Ham, Brentford. Oh my God, Leeds, West Ham, Brentford, Wolves, and even Sunderland. I've got a lot to fight for on the last day here. Sunderland getting beat by Chelsea, not what they need. United getting beat by Brighton, Crystal Palace and Arsenal draw on the last day. Burnley getting beat by Wolves. Wolves make sure they're safe. Fulham make sure they're safe for winning against Newcastle. Liverpool beating Brentford to make sure they are safe. City beating Villa. Forest and Bournemouth drawing. Spurs beating Everton. And oh my God, West Ham Leeds on the last day here. West Ham drawing with Leeds. What does that do? That means West Ham survive and Bournemouth get relegated. Bournemouth get 10 wins on the board, but it's not enough for them. Leeds also go down on 32 points. That game is a survival game. West Ham just need to not lose it. Sunderland stay up. Wolves stay up. Fulham comfortably stay up. So does Everton, made a good count for themselves. Villa dropped off massively. Brighton finished at the bottom half. Newcastle make up that top half. I think it was a poor transfer window, did not help them. Crystal Palace doing okay for themselves with a European season. Same as Forest doing okay for themselves with a European season. Higher than I initially had them, not going to lie. Spurs with 65 points doing well for themselves. Bournemouth United made a good fight for it on the season. But then Chelsea making it the top 4 with Liverpool, City and Arsenal finishing within 3 points of each other is insane. That is the end of the video, guys. If you got a video, please like to see more, subscribe. Thank you for watching, guys.